Terrifying, real paranormal encounters you can't explain, but won't forget. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The Hardware Store Haunting. I worked at a small, family-owned hardware store in Seattle for 10 years. The place had been around since the 1940s, and aside from some renovations over the years, it still had that old-world charm. Dim lighting, wooden shelves stacked with tools, and an ever-present scent of sawdust and oil. The building was a good size, with a big open floor plan, 2 back rooms, and a loft that overlooked the main floor. Underneath the loft was the workshop and the key-cutting department. We had our fair share of quirks. The owner, an older guy who had practically grown up in the store, used to swear he'd hear footsteps running across the roof late at night. I thought he was just imagining things until I heard it myself. The store had no roof access, no ladders, no way for an animal to get up there. But I'd hear the distinct sound of heavy boots pounding across the ceiling whenever I closed up alone. At first, I chalked it up to my imagination. An old building creaks, right? But then, I started hearing voices. Soft whispers near the shelves. The occasional murmur in the empty back rooms. Never loud enough to make out the words, but just enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck. Still, nothing ever felt threatening. That is, until one morning. It was a rainy day, typical Seattle weather. I had the opening shift and got to the store at 5:30 a.m. Aside from the steady drumming of rain against the roof, the place was dark and silent. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I heard something shift beneath the loft. I froze, listening. It wasn't the usual old building groans. It was deliberate movement. Then, a voice. A man's voice. At first, I thought maybe the owner had come in early, but the store was still alarmed, meaning no one should be inside. The voice wasn't loud, just a steady, one-sided conversation, like someone talking to themselves. I swallowed my nerves and made my way to the alarm panel near the back, my footsteps echoing in the empty store. I flicked on the lights for the back rooms, then turned toward the main floor. That's when I saw him. Up in the loft, barely visible in the dim light, stood a man. He was about 6 feet tall, with a full beard, maybe in his 50s. His clothes were old, like something from the 70s, faded and stained with time. He was just standing there, watching me. My breath hitched. We weren't open yet. The alarm had been set overnight. There was no way anyone should be in the store. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask who the hell he was, but before I could, he moved. Not toward the stairs, not toward any exit. He just walked into the shadows of the loft and disappeared. Not like he slipped out of sight. I mean, he vanished. I ran up the stairs, flipping on every light I could. The loft was empty. No footprints on the dust-covered floor. No signs that anyone had ever been up there. But I know what I saw. After that day, things took a turn. Tools started falling off display shelves for no reason. Not just tipping over, flying off as if they had been thrown. Heavy wrenches, power drills, hammers. One time, a whole pegboard of pliers came crashing down just as I walked by. I nearly got hit. The voices became clearer too. I'd hear whispers at closing, muttering in the empty aisles. Sometimes it wasn't just one voice anymore. It was two. Then came the incident that made me quit. It was another late-night closing shift. The store was empty, the front doors locked. I was doing the final sweep of the floor, making sure everything was in place, when I heard the footsteps. They were coming from the roof, running, fast. I stood frozen beneath the loft, heart hammering in my chest. Then, the footsteps moved inside. They were on the loft. I whipped my head around, expecting to see someone up there, but it was empty. Then, the lights flickered. A metallic clang rang out as something heavy fell in the workshop beneath the loft. I ran over, expecting to see a fallen tool. However, I saw the strangest thing. It was just me and another employee at the front helping me close. Walking toward the aisle, I saw the light on the motion sensor light up. Motion detected in every single aisle. When walking toward the back, there was a man in the workshop. The same man I'd seen in the loft. Only this time, his face was wrong. His eyes were black holes, his mouth stretched too wide, his face tilted slightly. Then, the lights went out. I sprinted to the front door, fumbling with my keys with shaking hands. The store was deathly silent now. No footprints, no voices, nothing. I yanked the door open, and me and my employee Mike ran into the rain, gasping for air. I never stepped foot in that store again. Later on, I found out that back in the 1960s, a man went missing from the hardware store. He had been a worker, someone who had been there for years. One night, he stayed late to work in the loft and was never seen again. The police found his car parked outside, his belongings still inside, but no trace of him was ever found. The owner didn't like talking about it. Neither did the older employees. I could see it in their eyes. They knew. They all knew. I just found out then, and that was enough for me. Kitchen cloud. When my life hit rock bottom, I had no choice but to call my dad. I was jobless, depressed, weak, just a complete mess. To his credit, he didn't hesitate. He told me to come home, get back on my feet. It wasn't much, but it was stability. A warm house, a couch to sleep on, food in the fridge, and most of all, our dogs. 3 little black labs, Ginger, Pepper, and Sage. My dad called them the Spice Girls. I needed that comfort. I needed to feel something good again. That first night back, I finally felt at peace. My dad and my stepmom went to bed early, leaving me alone in the living room with the dogs. The only light in the house came from the kitchen, the ceiling fan light above the table. It was dim, warm, and annoyingly persistent, making it hard to drift off. Even though I had my own bedroom, I felt comfortable here in the living room with the dogs. But I didn't complain. It wasn't my house. Not anymore. The house creaked in its familiar ways, the kind of sounds that only feel eerie when you've been gone long enough to forget them. I sat back in the recliner, eyes half closed, listening to the steady hum of the fan and the occasional deep breath from the dogs in their kennel. And then, the growling started. Low, quiet, almost imperceptible at first. It was Pepper. She was the smallest of the three, but the feistiest. I figured she was just annoyed by one of the others shifting around, so I ignored it. Then she growled again, deeper this time, with a sharp little ruff at the end. I sat up and whispered, "Shh, you're fine." But she wasn't fine. She was staring straight into the kitchen, not at the food bowl, not at the back door, at something above the table. I followed her gaze. At first, I didn't see anything. The fan was spinning lazily, its shadow swaying across the walls. But then, just beyond the light's reach, I saw it. A cloud. No, not a cloud. Something worse. It hovered just beneath the ceiling fan, completely still, despite the air circulation. A shifting, transparent mass, like thick fog clinging to one spot. The longer I stared, the more distinct it became, like it was pulling itself into focus. It wasn't just mist, it was something else. I should have been terrified. I should have run to my dad's room, banged on the door, anything. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, locked in place. And what scared me the most was that deep inside, I didn't want to move. Pepper let out another low growl, pressing her tiny frame against the back of the kennel. The other two dogs, normally so in sync with her, didn't react at all. They slept peacefully, completely unaware. But Pepper saw it, and so did I. I don't know how long I stared, minutes maybe. The cloud didn't move, didn't dissipate. It just watched. Then the fan light flickered, and the cloud moved. Not like smoke dispersing, it shifted, poured downward, stretching toward the ground, elongating into something vaguely human-shaped. I could almost make out a head, shoulders, arms. I swear to God, I saw fingers. That's when something inside me finally screamed, "Move." I snapped out of my trance, shot up from the recliner so fast I nearly tipped it over. My eyes darted back to the kitchen, but the cloud was gone. The fan spun quietly, the light as steady as ever. The kitchen was empty, just like before. But Pepper was still staring, her body rigid, ears pinned back, her breathing shallow and fast. I didn't sleep that night. Hell, I didn't even stay in the living room. I grabbed a blanket and crashed on the floor outside my dad's bedroom door. I told him about it the next morning. As expected, he laughed, chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, maybe even a sleep paralysis episode. My stepmom, though, she just listened. Then she asked me something that made my blood run cold. "You said it was above the kitchen table, right?" I nodded. She hesitated before saying, "Your mother passed away in this house, in that very spot." I knew that. I had always known that. It happened when I was so young, and I didn't really know her. I only really knew my stepmom as my mom, but I had never thought about it. Not like that. It made sense in a way. The feeling of calm, the way I wasn't afraid. Maybe it really was her. Maybe she was just letting me know she was there. That's what I told myself. That's what I made myself believe. But deep down, looking back, something felt wrong. Because if it had been my biological mother, why was Pepper so afraid? Was it a warning? Was it something else? That is the question that still lingers in my mind. The night visitor. I've never been a good sleeper. Even as a kid, I'd lie awake for hours, my mind racing, my body restless. Moving into a new apartment with my girlfriend didn't help. Time flew by, and it had almost been a year since we moved in. The place was nice enough, great neighborhood, spacious rooms, but old. It had that musty, lived-in smell that never quite left no matter how much we aired it out. The hardwood floors creaked no matter how carefully we stepped, and the pipes groaned whenever the water ran. I was exhausted though. New job, new apartment, family drama. It was wearing me down. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in days, so I finally gave in and tried a new supplement. Something over the counter, nothing crazy, just enough to knock me out. That night, I had the strangest dream. I was running through a city, but the streets were made of water, not frozen, just standing. Deep black water, stretching out in every direction, rippling under my steps. The buildings around me were warped, sagging inward like they were breathing. The streetlights flickered, and I could hear something behind me. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned a corner and saw my girlfriend standing at the end of an alley, but her face was wrong. Her eyes were too wide, her mouth just slightly open, like she was about to say something, but couldn't. I tried to call her name, but my voice didn't work. And then she disappeared. Gone. That's when I woke up. I felt heavy, groggy, like my body was full of wet cement. My vision was blurry, and my mouth was dry as hell. I blinked a few times, trying to clear my eyes, and turned my head toward the cable box. I just wanted to check the time. That ugly yellow-green light flickered in and out of focus. I couldn't quite make it out. 4:02, I think it said. And then, footsteps. Soft, careful, coming from the hallway. I tensed up immediately. We always kept the bedroom door closed, but now I could see it was open, just a crack. The hallway beyond it was pure darkness, pitch black. I stared at that sliver of darkness, waiting. Nothing. Maybe I was dreaming. The supplement could have been messing with me. That made sense, right? Just some lingering half-dream hallucination. I grabbed my AirPods from the nightstand, shoved them in my ears, and put on some sleep music. Ignore it, forget it, I said, and sleep. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, my girlfriend was stirring beside me. She sat up, stretching, then whispered, "It's so hot in here." I felt the bed shift as she got up and went to the bathroom. I didn't think much of it until she came back a few minutes later, crawling under the covers. Then she asked me something that sent ice through my veins. "Hey, did you touch my feet when you got up?" I turned my head toward her, confused. "What?" She yawned. "I was up when you got up. When you went back to sleep, I felt you rub my leg and kiss my forehead." My skin went cold. I hadn't gotten up. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. She must have felt unease because she frowned, propping herself up on one elbow. I swallowed hard. I said, "I never got up." She laughed, but it was uneasy. "Yeah, okay, sure." "I didn't," I said. Her expression shifted. I could see the sleepiness draining from her face as realization settled in. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The apartment was silent. The air felt wrong, like something was still in the room with us. Then the floor creaked. Both of us turned toward the open bedroom door, and for the briefest second, just long enough for my mind to register it, I thought I saw something. A shape, tall, still, watching. Then it was gone. My girlfriend slammed the door shut so fast the whole frame rattled. Neither of us slept after that. The next morning, we checked the locks. Everything was secure. The front door, the windows, untouched. There was no way someone had broken in, and yet, neither of us could shake the feeling that we weren't alone that night. I started doing some digging, trying to find anything about the building. It was old, sure, but nothing too crazy. No reported murders, no ghost stories, just normal. We moved out a month later after our lease expired, but even now, even in a new apartment, far away from that place, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, and every time, I check the time on the cable box, and it always says 4:02 a.m.